you need estrogen, you need hormone therapy. I was like, am I a woman anymore? Am I old? What's going on? And I didn't have anyone to talk to about it. Those are words that we never spoke out loud before. We're really not allowed to say the word clitoris. We've become accustomed to is watching women suffer and then finally being like, okay, fine. If you really need it, I'll give you some coconut oil for your vagina. And it's not just estrogen and progesterone or even testosterone. Of course, thyroid, your thyroid depends on hormones. Like we have tons of different hormones in our bodies. Estrogen is not just a female hormone and testosterone is not just a male hormone. We all have all the hormones. Most doctors that you go to are actually uninformed. There was one woman who had a hysterectomy at 37, was never given any kind of support or hormonal support or emotional support since that point. And it was about, 10 or 15 years later, I think. And her vaginal symptoms and dryness was so severe that she could hardly walk. And it's horseshit that women that we get to this stage of life and have no idea what to expect or that it's coming. When I grew up, you were smart or slutty. You couldn't be both. Mm-hmm. The reason that I discovered using estrogen on my skin was that I peed in my pants at the supermarket.
Hi, my name is Theo, and this is Mira Talks. Here, we have conversations with women who turn personal challenges into industry breakthroughs in health, hormone wellness, and advocacy. This podcast is powered by Mira, the hormone health monitor that helps you understand your body and make confident, informed decisions about your health and future. Today, our guest is Monica Molenaar, co-founder and co-CEO of Alloy, one of the leading digital platforms for menopause care in the US. At 39, Monica was tested positive for BRCA1. And at 40, she underwent preventative surgery. And so she entered surgical menopause overnight. She knows a lot about hormones, both from her own journey, finding the right treatment for herself, and also from building Alloy. And I'm really, really, really excited to learn more from her today. Monica, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Before we dive into everything that we're going to talk about today, I cannot help it, but I just need to know it because you mentioned that you love fermented foods. Mm-hmm. Tell me, what's your current obsession?
Fermented vegetables, so kimchi, sauerkraut, fermented beets. We both live in the Netherlands, and there's a shop called Eco Plaza that has kind of all organic stuff. So they have little pots of different types of fermented vegetables, and then I get a bunch, probably 3 or 4 at a time, so that I can switch off and have something fermented at almost every meal. I actually have a relationship with a kimchi maker in Rotterdam who I used to go and get like kilos at a time of
I'm going to need that contact. Yeah. Because I've been trying to make all these recipes by myself. Have you tried to do it yourself?
Yeah, I've made a lot of things by myself, but I used to make a lot of sauerkraut. I made this kind of cultured dairy called...
the kefir?
I've made kefir. Yes, I had grains, so I went through my kefir, but I was making so much of it that I couldn't drink it, and that's also the thing with...
And it just multiplies, right? Like you have the grain,
so
just keep on growing.
I had like so many babies that I had too many. I didn't have enough people to take the grains. Yeah. I have one friend in particular who's like my fermenting friend, and she and I kind of, for the last 10 years, have gone through different phases of things that we make ourselves. Oh, El Ruderite, cultured dairy. That's the one. It's a different strain, and it's supposed to actually be really good for your skin and for your weight. But I find that if I eat too much dairy, actually, that it isn't. I don't like it. So that's kind of, I've brought it back to vegetables, fermented vegetables, and also, of course, the Alloy probiotics that I also just gave you, which I really like because they're spore-based, which is a different type of probiotic. So it doesn't need to be refrigerated. You don't need billions and billions because they actually make it through your digestive tract to the gut, like whole. So then they can do their work. They have little like exoskeletons over the bacteria.
I'm really looking forward to try them out as well. Thanks so much for the little gift. Because like probiotics, they're so important for hormone health, right?
It's so important for everything, for your immune system, for, just really keeping your gut diverse. And it's something that I think we've only learned about really in the last, 10 or 15 years has become more common knowledge, but it's way more important than people realize. And before I was into menopause, I was into food. One of the things I think I told you is that I'm a cook. And so I spend a lot of time actually thinking about what I eat, and I really enjoy it. But most people really don't have a very diverse diet and eat the same thing over and over again and don't get probiotics naturally in their food, which is a reason to take a probiotic, but there are plenty of ways to, I love kombucha. I've tried making that too, but some of the things I just find it's easier to buy.
Yeah.
Other people make them better than I do.
I remember, because you mentioned that variety in foods that is so important for your microbiome. I remember hearing this conversation with the lead doctor behind Zoe, the company from the UK.
Yep.
He was mentioning exactly this, like that variety in food. And he was recommending about 40 different vegetables to be consumed across 1 week.
Wow.
To ensure that you get that diversity in your microbiome.
Yeah.
And like in the 40, not necessarily veggies, also spices count in that 40.
Herbs,
exactly.
Cilantro, basil, those types of things.
So variety
I think
really
about
key.
that a lot when I cook, also like adding extra things in to be able to, whether it's additional nutrients or fiber, things that you need.
Yeah. So lifestyle is really important when it comes to hormone health. Right.
The lifestyle is really important when it comes to hormone health, for sure. And it's important when it comes to overall health, which is really what the whole longevity and health span sort of movement or trend or whatever it is, however you want to call it, is about. It's really about maximizing your health right now so that in 5, 10, 20, 30 years, you've had a good track record of being healthy. And I think that the microbiome is actually really one of the most important aspects of that, and just, keeping your body in sort of an optimized state, essentially. And so all of these things work together. It's actually why we called the company that I started with my partner Alloy, because an alloy is a combination of elements for strength and protection against corrosion, which is exactly what you need, in particular at midlife, around perimenopause or menopause, to, it's not just one thing. It's not just hormones. It's all of the other things that have to work in concert. I think we've gotten so specialized in medicine and separating medicine and wellness, and really it's one body that you live in.
Everything is interconnected.
Everything works together.
Yeah.
And so you can't think of the right arm as different from the left arm. You have to think about the whole body, mind, body, gut connection. And I think, that's something that I try to embody in my own life.
And we see that also being illustrated in the company that you lead. And I'm gonna get to that in a second. Like, we want to hear how you studied Alloy, and we want to hear all the good stories behind it. But I know that there is a point in your life that was really the moment when your entire life trajectory took another turn. I know that you did a test, right? And the results of that test made you change your entire life. Tell us about that moment.
So I was diagnosed when I was 39 with the BRCA gene, the BRCA gene, or the breast cancer gene. Shouldn't have come as a surprise. I was always treated as if I had the gene, because my mother and my grandmother both had breast cancer very young. My mother was 36 the first time she had breast cancer, and then she had a recurrence at 45. And her mother had a similar story, but her mother's cancer also spread to her ovaries. And neither of them died from it. I mentioned to you, my mother just passed away a few months ago at 79, but her first breast cancer was 36. So she, lived a quite a long life and died from other things. But at 39, as I was learning more about this, I already had 2 children. I really wanted to make sure that I was there for my children and that I wasn't going through, a major disease and surgery and all kinds of stuff unexpectedly. So, and I had been really encouraged from the time that I was 25 by all the doctors that I saw who were screening me to at least have my ovaries removed, if not my breasts.
Oh, so the recommendation already came so early on.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Well, I decided when I was 40 then and finally did. Up until that point, I really felt like I wasn't prepared to do something surgical. At 25, I didn't have children yet. My breasts were kind of like part of my identity, which is, weird to say, but true. And so I just wasn't really prepared to do like prophylactic surgery that I wasn't sure was necessary. And I wasn't really scared of breast cancer because my mother had gotten through it. And, I felt like it was something that you could screen for and then you could deal with if you got it. But ovarian cancer is a different story. And by the time I was 39, and Angelina, how it kind of really came together was that Angelina Jolie wrote this very impactful op-ed for the New York Times that really was, like the shot that was heard around the world when she decided to have her ovaries removed and a prophylactic mastectomy because she had the same BRCA positive gene that I did. And there was a lot of information coming out at the time that if you have this gene and you have your ovaries removed by the time you're 40, that you can further reduce your risk of breast cancer by 50%. And that was compelling to me because, one, it was non-cosmetic, and I didn't even have to stay overnight in the hospital. And, all of the doctors were like, yeah, you can just get your ovaries removed and you'll be done. Mm-hmm. And you already have children, so sort of no big deal. You don't want more kids, or if you do want more kids, now's the time to decide. And that was actually a difficult point also because, making that final decision not to have more children was more difficult than I had expected, actually. But anyway, needless to say, I decided to remove my ovaries, but nobody talked to me about the fact that I was going into menopause the next day and would stay in menopause for the rest of my life. So that was a whole other thing to deal with. But at the moment that I actually found out, I even remember, I'll never forget the actual moment that the doctor called me. It was a Friday afternoon. I was in my apartment, sort of getting the family ready to go out for I think it was a holiday, actually. And it was around December, and we were preparing for some family party or something that we were all going to. And the doctor called and, said, like, we got the test results back and you're positive. And so like, we'll make an appointment and we can talk about what to do next. And I just remember all the blood draining out of my face. And even though I expected it.
And it was a 50-50 chance. So there was a slight chance to always have it, right?
There was no way that I didn't have this gene, and it still came as a surprise. And then beyond the surprise also was sort of the emotion of, okay, I'm not having more children. Okay, now I need to figure out, what I need to do. I needed to manage also everybody else's emotions around it, which was really difficult. For my husband, it was difficult, just that emotion of like the fear of losing me, became something that actually was difficult in our relationship because I was like, this is happening to me. I have to make these decisions, and they're difficult decisions, and now I have to manage your emotions too. And so these types of things sort of spiral outside of what you even may think in terms of how it affects you and your relationship and relationships and how you feel about yourself. And was I going to be a woman anymore if I didn't have my own breasts and or my own ovaries and making estrogen. And so it was a very, very difficult time. But at that moment, I did decide to have my ovaries removed, and I didn't have my breasts removed until 11 years later, which I have done since.
Wow.
Yeah.
And look, when I hear your story, it sounds that you were still someone who knew about the possibility of you carrying this gene mutation so early on, right? You were in your mid-20s when you were already having this conversation. So you would say that you had the time to mentally prepare for what was about to come or potentially about to come. So I just wonder how it is for women, who just hear from like overnight that they are carrying this mutation and they didn't have the time to mentally prepare for what's about to come.
Yeah.
How did you navigate like that mental preparedness? Like what did you actually do?
I don't think I did. Well, first of all, the interesting thing about the gene is that I'm about to turn 52 in a few weeks. So all of this was taking place, a while ago,
sure.
11, 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And then even longer sort of the screening time. Like I got my diagnosis 11 or 12 years ago. And then, the 20 years before that is kind of when I was being screened. But there really wasn't a lot of information about I didn't know from the time that I was 25 that there was a gene. We sort of suspected that there could be, or that I was at a higher risk because I had such a strong family history of having breast cancer, and ovarian cancer in the family. But there wasn't, even as I was going through it, there was a lot more information that was coming out about the gene specifically. And then I believe actually BRCA2 was identified even after I was diagnosed with BRCA1. So there are multiple gene mutations, and, research is continually I don't know about now, but generally speaking, like the research is evolving and we're learning more things. This is actually something that was quite new at the time. And you really had to also have a strong family history even to be considered for the test. I would say that those years of preparedness actually were really more like I was just actually placing all that fear and responsibility on the doctors who were screening me so that I could just live my life and be a mother and, not be afraid of it. So that was more of my strategy.
That was like more than 10 years ago. Yeah. Have things changed in the meantime? Like how easy it is nowadays to get such a test? Do you know how stories from other women maybe?
I am not 100% sure, to be perfectly frank. I think that it's definitely easier and there are a lot more markers now that we know or reasons why you might get tested. So I come from an Ashkenazi Jewish bloodline, and that is a very common trait or group that has this gene mutation. There are others that scientists have now, kind of identified. And so I think that there are a lot more women who fall into the pools that would get you sort of the option to get this test.
Are there any symptoms that you would feel if you carry this gene, I wonder? No, not at all. So you basically feel normal. It's just that if you know that there is something in your family history, then it's something that raises questions.
Well,
and then
the other thing is I think what's really important is that we do know this at this point, like genetics are not the only thing, the only determinant, right? They're one aspect of the things that kind of determine what will happen with your personal health. For example, I mentioned that I'm really interested in food and cooking and like what I eat and what I consume. And I don't know that was the same for my mother. My mother was a great cook, but she wasn't interested in nutrition and health. And so I think there's also an environmental aspect that we need to consider, both outside of your body, but also within your body, depending on, what you eat, whether you exercise, are you strength training?
You know the saying, right?
No.
Like genes load the gun, it's your environment that pulls the trigger.
Yeah.
Right?
That's 100% true. So I was always actually of the mindset that I wasn't getting this. This wasn't going to happen to me. And I think that there's also actually an element of, power in that frequently does work. I actually wear this bracelet that says manifest that shit. And I really believe that. You can really create your path and I am an example of that. I've done a lot of different things and I've, kind of developed expertise in a lot of different areas and have a lot of different interests. But, obviously you can't 100% control what's going to happen to you. But I try to manage as much as I can, like exert as much control over my environment as I possibly can. And when I can't control it, then I also try and let that go and not sit in fear waiting for things to happen that I have no control over. That's how I manage my own anxiety, I guess, about these things.
Well, that's how it works, right? Like, be aware that there are so many things out of your control, and those are the things that stresses us the most. But once you're aware that they are really outside your circle of control, that's how the moment you let go, and that's when your anxiety and your stress levels are more in control. Yeah. That's the only way. And you mentioned that, it was an overnight surgery menopause for you, like an offset of menopause. How did that feel for you? So, like in a natural environment, right? Like for a woman that is going through her perimenopausal years and that goes into menopause and postmenopausal year, there's a transition that just is a gradual progression, right? We just had Dr. Carrie Jones on the podcast, and she was talking to us about the perimenopausal years and the symptoms that women experience during these years. But for you, it was a whole different story, right? Like one day you have a natural cycle, and then the next day you wake up without a cycle at all, right? You are officially into menopause.
Yeah.
How does that actually feel?
Bananas. It was very, very difficult. Also because I was so young and it was 11 years ago. So this whole conversation about hormones and perimenopause, I didn't go through perimenopause. I had an IUD before I had the surgery. So I wasn't menstruating. Like I just was a regular 30 9-year-old woman. And then the next day, or I guess I was 40 when I had the surgery. So the next day, now all of a sudden, as I said to you, I was like, am I a woman anymore? Am I old? What's going on? And I didn't have anyone to talk to about it. And so I had, of course, my friends, but they didn't know anything. And the doctors, my OB said, well, you can't take estrogen because your mom had breast cancer. And the surgeon said, yes, you should take hormones, but just to wait until you need them because you'll still have some estrogen circulating through your body. So what does that mean? Who knows when you need them? And I never had hot flashes. And that was the only symptom that I knew. But the surgeon did say it's very important to have estrogen for your bones, your brain, and your heart. And you're very young, so you should get it. But I literally couldn't get the prescription because my OB said no. So what was I supposed to do? And actually the cancer hospital where I had my surgery also didn't have gynecologists who were on staff to see you if you didn't have cancer. And so I was really in this sort of like floating around that I had no help, no support, no information, no friends.
Where would you look for information back then? Because I remember that was longer than 10 years ago. I remember when I got my PCOS diagnosis, that was roughly around the same time. And there was nothing. Like the social media was not as it is nowadays.
No.
You obviously didn't have AI to now just like prompt it and like get you the summary of whatever condition.
Yeah.
I barely had I remember it was Reddit. I would just read some threads, what other people would experience, but that was it.
Yeah. I didn't even really honestly kind of know the term surgical menopause. So I wouldn't have even known really what to look up. And again, since I didn't have hot flashes and nobody had prepared me for what, even like all I knew was that I was having my ovaries removed, but I was so uninformed about my body that I didn't know. Yeah. We always think of estrogen as a sex hormone, that it's only for reproduction, or I had no idea that it had such an impact, or that it has such an impact on everything from your skin to your bones, your brain, your heart, your digestion, everything. So when you lose the estrogen, your body and your cells do start to kind of go crazy. And as I also said, I was dealing at the same time with first of all, I had 2 small children at the time, and sort of the emotions of, okay, now we're not having any more children. And so then my husband was like, okay, well, so now you should probably go back to work, because I also hadn't been working for a few years. And so I was working outside the home. I was taking care of my kids, but then they had gone to school. And so I was really in a state of I don't know who the hell I am or what to do or where to go tomorrow, except, picking up my kids from school and doing all the things I knew. But if that was not what my future looked like, then where do I even begin? And who am I? And in the meantime, in this sort of 10 years between the time that I had my kids and I had my ovaries removed, because my first baby was born when I was still 30, about to turn 31, and then I was 40 when I had my ovaries removed. So it was this perfect 10-year kind of span. And in that time, Facebook had popped up, LinkedIn had popped up, all these social media things had come, or companies and sites and things had sort of had arisen that hadn't been there before. So with LinkedIn, for example, it totally changed how work was and what you could get hired for. So when I was coming out of college, for example, I studied history and urban studies, which was an interdisciplinary, no real skills in that, but the skill was critical thinking, being able to come up with ideas, to write, to talk and communicate. But that wasn't a specific job. And after LinkedIn, if you arose, if you didn't have a specific job, you weren't going to get that job. So, I wanted to do something different than I had done before. And so I was really lost and really didn't know.
So many changes around the same time.
It was so many changes. Which is sort of, so you asked, how did I deal with it? I can remember sitting in my room one day, waking up and just in the dark, shades closed, I'm not going out. I don't even know. I can't move, I really was in a pretty big crisis for a while. And I had a neighbor at the time who lived across the hall. I was living in New York City in a big apartment building. And this neighbor across the hall I had become friendly with because she had a puppy and I had 2 small kids. And so that was a perfect combo that we could sort of rent the puppy every once in a while. And she saw me one day. We had a shared roof deck for the building, and I was just kind of sitting there having a bit of a personal crisis upstairs. And she came upstairs and saw me on the roof and said, "Are you okay? Can I help you with something? Like you look really bad, and I would love to, help you." And I told her what had happened and about the surgery, and I just sort of broke down. And she said, "Oh, I can help you. I have somebody for you to go to. I know exactly what this is, And that was the first person really. She literally put her arm around me and said, "Here's the number. Call this woman." And it was she wasn't a doctor, but she was a sort of naturopath PA, like a hormone expert in New York, who treated women. And I went to her office and I was like, "Okay, I don't have to take my clothes off. We're just talking. This is the strangest doctor's appointment I've ever had." And she was like, "Well, I know exactly what's wrong with you. You need estrogen. You need hormone therapy. Here are some other things you might want for sleep and some supplements and L-theanine and various things,"
But what was the thing that you feel like you were not prepared at all? Like the moment you started to experience all these symptoms, because you mentioned the sleep patterns, it's like, what was the one thing that really you wish that someone would have told you at least about what to expect?
All of the things, but it's not just about hot flashes. And it's really, in particular, if you're that young, and really at any point, it's really about prevention. It's about long-term health. It's about, this is really the longevity hack, is making sure that you are healthy and that your cells can continue to sort of work the way that they're supposed to for the rest of your life. And I think what we have become accustomed to is women going into menopause, not getting treated, developing chronic diseases, and then we treat those chronic diseases. Yeah. And with far worse medications, with far worse side effects, with, diminished quality of life for women over decades when you're dealing with chronic disease, that all could be prevented if you actually just maintain your hormonal levels to, what we give women in menopause is essentially a microdose of hormones, but it's enough to solve the symptoms today and improve and maintain your health span over the long term, which for me is incredibly important. I'm a little bit of a health warrior, on my own for myself. As I said, I find I do a lot of things to kind of maintain my health because I think it's important and I feel better today and I want to feel better tomorrow. That kind of prevention and real information about how your body works, and that hormones are not just about reproduction and getting pregnant, but they're there for your whole body, is something that
so many functions, like all systems in the body get affected by hormones. Yeah. It's incredible.
They are the chemical, and it's not just estrogen and progesterone or even testosterone. Of course, thyroid, your thyroid depends on hormones. Like we have tons of different hormones in our bodies. And also estrogen is not just a female hormone and testosterone is not just a male hormone. We all have all the hormones and we have them in differing amounts. And also you and I may have different amounts of our hormones, and so that is also an important thing to understand, that we're not trying to always get to a specific ideal. It's kind of like what your ideal is may be different from mine. And these were the things that I was really searching for, this kind of information, how do I know what to do? More
individual, on an individual personalized level, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And also what are the other things that I can do for myself to kind of get back to feeling like myself. And that's sort of where, I reached this pretty deep low when I went into menopause, and then I needed to kind of climb back out of that. But the very bare minimum of what I wanted to feel was like myself, I could recognize myself.
And did that friend of yours that you were together, that she gave you that hug and told you about estrogen, was that then the first time that you studied hormone replacement therapy?
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about that journey. What kind of, because there are so many different types, right?
Exactly.
And so many ways to.
I've tried every type. So that was that was the journey that really led me to starting Alloy. The first person that I went to prescribed a compounded estrogen cream and micronized progesterone pill, or capsule, and those are pretty much generally always the same. You don't use progesterone transdermally. But so she offered me this cream, prescribed me the cream and the progesterone, and I think maybe a few other supplements. But basically it was the hormone therapy, just kind of standard. But she prescribed it from a compounding pharmacy, which is not bad.
What is a compounding pharmacy?
A compounding pharmacy means that it's not coming in a package already sort of mass produced. It's made individually in the pharmacy for the patient. And after the Women's Health Initiative study came out in 2002, which is the thing that kind of disrupted all of the access for women to estrogen and changed the information that we sort of knew to be true, that estrogen is safe and helpful, into estrogen is scary and something that you should fear. It's going to give you breast cancer. Not true. But there was a 20-year period where everybody believed this, and women were throwing out their hormones and, not taking it because they believed that it was so dangerous. So in the meantime, lots of other things kind of crept up. And as we know, estrogen is the thing that's or hormone therapy, estrogen and progesterone together are the things that are going to make you feel much better in the menopausal transition, whether that's perimenopause or menopause. And so this sort of, in the absence of like the commercially available hormone therapy being made readily accessible to women, doctors started writing prescriptions from compounding pharmacies, and it was called, bioidentical and personalized, and they used all these terms to make it feel safer and more personalized, even though the doses really were very standard for women, basically. And so, but there, as happens frequently in medicine, this doctor doesn't believe that doctor, and that doctor says, this one's a scam artist and whatever. And so like there's a lot of infighting within medicine, just generally speaking. And so I sort of fell into that trap of like, okay, well, I'm getting something that made me feel so much better, but I now go to this doctor because I'm not sure exactly who this woman is who just prescribed it or why I'm getting it from.
It's still the case today, I feel.
It's still the case
like
today.
The narrative in medicine, if you take even nutrition, there's always going to be two chems on any topic that you research. So how do you choose then who to follow?
So then I went back to the hospital, actually, a doctor there. I was like, please, can somebody see me? Because and she took a look at what I was taking. She was like, you can't take this. You need to take that. And she prescribed me like I think a patch and a pill and an estrogen patch. And I really didn't like the estrogen patch. It didn't make me feel better. I didn't like the way that it, left a dirt ring on my stomach. It was also, again, I was very young, and this was something that I wasn't really public about at the time. And so this felt like something very obvious that I could see. It was a constant visual reminder of you're in menopause, this just happened to you. And so I didn't want the patch on me at all. And so then I sort of entered this like kind of 5-year period of just finding okay, I'll go to the next doctor. Like these two doctors aren't giving me a straight answer or the answer that I want, so I'll go to somebody else. And then every time I went to a doctor, I would get a different answer, a different prescription. So in 5.5 years between going into menopause and starting Alloy, I went to at least 5 or 6 different doctors. I have tried, I've had compounded estrogen, I've had patches, I've had pellets, I've had pills, I've had spray, I've used gel, I've tried literally everything. I've tested everything on the market. So
this was like all the confusion was still coming only from the doctor's office. You bouncing from one office and the other. Yeah. But I feel like nowadays you do have the doctor's office, but then you also have the narrative online, because you have on social media, especially regarding any topic, they're always going to be experts. And I'm like air quoting this because not everyone is an expert on the topic, but then they do have an opinion about it.
Right.
How do you feel about that? Like, how do you feel about how it used to be, 10 years ago when you didn't have the access to all that information? Nowadays, we have an abundance of information. What's your take on it? Which one is doing
I think it's better now. I'm really, really happy. And we worked really, really hard to be a part of this information sort of explosion for women, because that was one of the biggest problems, was that I felt completely isolated. I felt, I was totally alone in this experience. I didn't have any information when I went through it. And it's horseshit that women that we get to this stage of life and have no idea what to expect or that it's coming, especially when it happens to 100% of women. No matter what, at a certain point, you could be 35, you could be 55. Every woman is an individual, but every woman, if she lives long enough to go into menopause, will go into menopause. So the fact that we each think that we're the first and only to experience this is ridiculous. And so it's really important that we actually talk about it. I think in terms of the amount of information and all of the noise that's out there, and we also, being in it, have to sort of shut out the noise sometimes. That's why when we built Alloy, we really wanted medical expertise on our team. And we started with Dr. Sharon Malone, who had a 30-year career as an OB-GYN in Washington, D.C. We heard her talking on the Michelle Obama podcast about hormones, about this very topic. Sharon takes hormones, Michelle Obama takes hormones, and how impactful it was for Michelle Obama to start hormone therapy when she went into menopause, because when she was having hot flashes on Air Force One, like, you get to this point in life and you're sort of at the top of the game, and all of a sudden you're chopped off at the knees. You go to seek help, and even though there is really fantastic help available that will really sort of stop you from having those hot flashes and let you feel like yourself again, the standard response is, even to Michelle Obama, is like, yeah, that sucks. Getting older, too bad. It's what we have done at Alloy is make sure that every woman is connected to a physician, an OB-GYN. Most likely, we have between 30 and 35 doctors right now who are prescribing on the platform. I would say 98% of them are OB-GYNs who have 15 to 30 years of experience. We have a urogynecologist and one family medicine practitioner and a dermatologist who's also obesity medicine certified and Menopause Society certified. So the doctors that we have on the platform are not only real experts in the subject matter, but also deeply care about treating women in this phase of life, about talking to women, about personalizing the care, about all. It's really driven by all of the things that I couldn't find myself, that I wanted to be able to, one, fix for myself, because by the time I started Alloy, I also didn't have consistent care at that point.
So what was that point for you then? Like, when did this surge of your own personal health journey, when did it turn into your company?
Business?
Yeah.
Well, going into menopause actually is what turned me into an entrepreneur. Because as I told you, between 30 and 40, when my kids were born, I really have done a lot of things. So I went back to work full time when my son was born, but I had a really inflexible employer, and I lost my childcare on December 23rd of 2005 when my older son was less than a year old. And I had 2 weeks of vacation for the year. That was my allotted vacation time. And I called my employer at the time and I said, it's Christmas and it's December 23rd. I'm about to leave for the Netherlands to visit my family-in-law, and we'll be back on, January 2nd or something. Is it possible for me to work part-time, or can I work from home while I search for a new childcare solution for my baby? And they said, no. They said, you can take your 2 weeks of vacation for the year, so January 2nd to, let's say, 16th, and then never have another day off for the rest of the year. And that was obviously not, I was luckily in a position at the time that my husband could support us if I stopped working. And so I did, and that kind of set off a 10-year period where I was at home, then I went to work part-time after my second son was born. I did PR for a couple of years, and then it was 2008, and my husband was working at Lehman Brothers, and we had just bought our apartment. And talk about anxiety. It was like, I need to go back to work full-time or be fully sedated. So I went back to work full-time, and then I did that for a few years, but I was traveling a lot, and so was my husband. We had 2 small children, and so then I stopped working again, and then I had my ovaries removed. and I was 40, and I sort of had this 4-year period, 10-year period where I was kind of in and out of working, but then a real 4-year period where I had a job, and now I was 40. And so I was considered like old and inexperienced, and it was really hard to find a job. And I wanted to do something different because I wanted to do something that I was more interested in than what I had been doing before. Also because I had done everything. I had been a stay-at-home mom. I had worked part-time. I'd been a full-time working mom. Like I knew the trade-offs that I was making, and I felt like for it to really grab me and my attention and my time, it needed to be something that I was interested in and that I could feel sort of ownership over. I couldn't find that job. I was getting rejected for $10 an hour internships. It didn't matter that I had an MBA from Stanford or that I had, that I was 40 years old. Like I literally could not get a job. And so I decided that, okay, I'm going to have to go start a business, create the job so that I can get the experience that I need to be able to get a job that somebody will pay me to do. I spent probably a year really sort of talking to people, honing, thinking about, what is it that will give me that passion and fuel to pull me away from what I'm currently doing, which even though I didn't have a full-time job, I certainly had plenty of things on my plate that I needed to take care of for my family. And I started a food business in 2015. We opened in January of 2016. In Chelsea Market in New York, a business called Seed and Mill, which just celebrated its 10th anniversary.
Amazing. Congratulations.
And one of my partners is running that. But we started with a shop, and then it turned into sort of an online and wholesale. The shop still is there in Chelsea Market. But that was a fantastic experience for me to really cut my teeth on being an entrepreneur. And what I discovered is that I love being an entrepreneur. I'm really good at kind of, identifying problems that need to be solved and kind of pulling people into, that project of like, and I learned this actually as I was kind of becoming an entrepreneur for the first time, like how important it is to really talk to people about your ideas, not to hold things too tightly and wait till it's perfect, but to really sort of, start the conversation and get things, start to kind of clarify things in your own mind and also see who's interested in joining and pulling a team together. So
how did it happen then with Alloy? Because you are now in the midst of searching the right form of estrogen for yourself. How did you get from there to building Alloy?
So I spent, let's say by that point I had spent 3.5 or 4 years in the food business. And as I keep saying, I'm really interested in cooking and in food. And so by this point I had also gained and lost 20 pounds of my menopausal weight and, was really trying to figure out like, how do I keep this weight off? Because my biggest symptoms going into menopause were I wasn't sleeping at all, which made it impossible for me to have the energy to go to the gym, which I wasn't that consistent at anyway at that point because I had 2 small children. So, I was just never really consistent with my own exercise and self-care. And so I was kind of in like up and down position all the time. But I really was interested in like how to eat for menopause and how do I still had my breasts also, so like I still had to be, I was screened for breast cancer.
How do you eat for menopause? Like what are the top 3 things that someone
Protein, fiber, top 3 things. Protein, fiber, and probiotics, I would say, are my top 3. Those are the things that I really make sure to incorporate. But I was in the food business, so I was trying to think: is there a business around eating for menopause? And then I met my partner, my now partner, Anne Fullenwider, who was at the time the editor-in-chief of Marie Claire magazine. So we literally met walking our dogs, and started. We both had puppies that kind of looked the same, and we kind of looked the same, and
is the same
similar.
Puppy that you had when you met your? No, this must have been like a second dog.
No, this is the only dog I've ever had that changed my life forever.
Same puppy, yeah, all right.
The same puppy. So he introduced me to Anne and her dog, Rocky, and we started walking the dogs together and just became friends, and we're talking about sort of all the things that women talk about in their mid-40s, which is, how do you feel? What are you going to do for the rest of your life? Are your parents sick or not? What's going on with your kids? Like all that stuff. And we were on vacation when we met, and when we got back to work. And at that moment also, I was sort of winding down from my day-to-day participation in Seed and Mill. We were 3 partners who started it together, and we didn't have really clear enough lanes in terms of what our responsibilities were. And so we kind of stepped on each other's toes for a period of time. And then it was clear that somebody needed to take it forward, but not all three of us. And I didn't really want to be that person to take it forward. And so I was trying to think about what was I going to do next at that moment. I was really in the midst of struggling myself with both the weight and the food and just the knowledge and information about menopause. And so when I met Anne, after we got back from vacation, we were both back at work or, sort of real life. I called her up and I was like, I think we should talk about this idea that I have about menopause. And I really think that you should quit your job and we should start a business. And she was like, that's interesting, but okay, I'll think about it. And then one thing led to another. And we were actually extremely lucky that she was introduced to the guy who became our first investor. And he was 29 at the time, and he was talking about the businesses that he had started and had invested in, and that he likes life stage businesses that have some friction or shame associated with it. And she said, "Oh, you should meet my friend Monica. She wants to start a menopause business. Do you know anything about menopause?" There's a lot of shame and friction. Yeah. And he was like, "I've been searching for a menopause business, but there aren't any." And so we started talking to him and his partner for about probably almost a year, actually. I mean, it really took a while to sort of develop.
When was this? When did you start it?
This was in 2000. We met in 2018, incorporated the business in 2000, at the end of 2019.
So that's like the black box warning, was still regarding estrogen back then.
Oh, it was still on. Alive and kicking. Yeah. So not only was the black box warning on, but also the Menopause Society has since really revised their guidelines, their recommendation guidelines. At the time, it said, take the lowest amount of estrogen for the shortest time possible, and you should still be afraid of it. And then in, I think, 2019, they revised that to that you don't need to take the lowest dose. Take the right dose for you. Take it for as long as you want and are still feeling the benefits of it, which basically is forever for most women who are taking it. Like, why would you ever stop? Because when you do stop, you also lose the protective benefits that it confers.
Did you feel at any level in your customers how they would interact with the idea of getting on such hormone therapy back then, and how is it now?
Totally
how did
different.
That change? Because it's on a span of what, 6 years?
We launched in November of 21. And so the interesting thing is that this investor, Encore, said, I'll give you some money. He in order for Anne to leave her full-time job, we needed to have some certainty that we had some money, and we wouldn't have just gone out to raise money because it was just too difficult. They really believed in us as a team, which was the right bet and really great, and gave us some money for that, to start, essentially. And it took us about, 3 or 4 months where we really spent, at the beginning, Anne was actually still working and I was just kind of gathering information. And what we were trying to figure out at first is, what are the things that aren't estrogen that actually work? What are the supplements that have been studied and proven to really help with menopause?
Right, so you haven't started directly with estrogen. You were looking first outside of estrogen.
We were looking first for not only anything outside of estrogen that we could do, because we thought that estrogen was going to be too difficult, even though I knew that was a thing that had worked for me. But I didn't know as much about estrogen and how it works and why it works and how preventive it is as I do now. So
what are those things? Are they still around in Alloy? Those things, like you mentioned, the probiotics, right? Was probiotics one of them?
We didn't go with that route because we found that none of the supplements that claim to be, good for menopause are, whether it's, I don't even remember them anymore. I think red clover and maca, and they may do some things.
They are supportive, but probably not
exactly. They could be supportive, but they're not going to solve the symptoms and protect your body. They're not replacing the thing or, that you lost that caused the problem in the first place. And so after doing months of research about different supplements, as well as really thinking about kind of who we wanted to be as a brand and reframing the narrative around menopause, because menopause was also seen as something that happened to old ladies,
Yes.
65-year-old women, gray-haired women, not 40-year-olds, not 48-year-olds. This was something that was in the future as opposed to right now. And actually, that's also misinformation. Menopause and perimenopause happens to, well, you're a bit younger, but, it could start at 35. Exactly. And if you're not aware of that, that's really difficult and troubling. So Anne actually went to hear a lecture by Avram Blooming, who wrote the book Estrogen Matters in New York City in early 2020. And she came back from this lecture, which was at a women's club that she went to with her aunt. She had just been invited, and we didn't know anything about Avram Blooming we really weren't going down the estrogen path. She came back and we were sitting in the office with this investor, and he said, okay, so what have you guys figured out in the last 4 months? And we really weren't any further than we had been, 4 months before, except that we had a really great manifesto of what we wanted to do, but that was kind of it.
We didn't know how we were going to get there.
We didn't know how we were going to get there. And Anne said to him, well, the only thing we know is that, or the one thing we know is that the only thing that truly works is hormones. And he said, so do that. And we're like, okay. That means we need doctors. That means we need, how are we going to do that? And at the time, HIMS had started and, had become somewhat popular for erectile dysfunction. Telehealth had become a thing around erectile dysfunction. That was kind of it. And so what we decided was to turn that model on its head, and where for erectile dysfunction, the whole goal is basically as much anonymity as you could possibly get, right? I have this problem that feels really embarrassing, and let me please get what I need without as little interaction as possible. We had a similar situation where this menopause is sort of a biological condition. Or a biological phase. I don't want to call it a medical condition, but it is treated, with a prescription, which again, I don't think hormones, we should call them medication. I think they are, in a sense, a supplement, but they're made by, they're a pharmaceutical supplement essentially, but it's not a medication because it's literally exactly what your body made molecularly that you're giving back to it. We just sort of pushed forward and realized okay, this is the thing if you really want to fix menopause, you need to solve that access gap to information, to expertise that will listen, validate, and prescribe the right thing, and actually to the prescriptions themselves. Because at each point along that path, and it had happened to me at every point, women get sort of pushed out and don't get what they need. So you either get bad information, you go to a doctor. Only 20%, to this day, only 20% of OB-GYN residents actually learn about menopause in medical school, and the rest of the medical students don't. And those 20% also aren't getting a whole curriculum about it. They may be getting an hour or two of information, and that's it in medical school to this day. Because when the Women's Health Initiative came out, also the medical schools decided, why would we teach about something that no one's going to take? So they didn't teach about estrogen anymore. And so most doctors that you go to are actually uninformed, feel uncomfortable even having the conversation. And also it's expensive for them to have the conversation because they can't really get reimbursed well for it. It's not a procedure. It's not a pregnancy. It's not ongoing. It's a conversation, which is why when I first went to the doctor, there was no examination. It was just, she was like, how are you feeling? And so it actually really lends itself well to telehealth. And back to sort of the HIMS thing, what we have done is compiled collected a really fantastic group of expert doctors that are licensed. We have doctors licensed in every state in the United States. And we use the technology to give women as much access to the doctor as they possibly can, as they possibly want. That sort of anonymity.
So how does it look like? So, because Eloy, I hear that part of the platform is telehealth.
Yeah.
How does it look like to do telehealth?
It's really through messaging. So you come in, you do an intake that has been really carefully thought through by the doctors to kind of give them all of the information that they need to be able to assess and prescribe or ask questions and, sort of start the relationship. The intake is kind of the beginning of the relationship between the patient and the doctor. And then you get assigned to a doctor who will message you back all through secure messaging within our platform, really to try and make that communication easy, same way that I speak to my kids through text for the most part, or, my friends were constantly texting. So it's sort of this meeting women where they are, not forcing them to take time out of their day or away from work or, to be able to get this medical care, but to have an ongoing conversation with a doctor over time. So you fill out your information, the doctor, you have let's say a text messaging back and forth conversation with the doctor if needed. This is really about hormone therapy. We also offer other things that require less sort of back and forth or less personalization, but still a doctor prescribing and you still get as much access to the doctor as you want. But hormone therapy tends to be, few people come to it without bias or some sort of notion about what they want or what they're afraid of.
I'm sure
so
they've
it requires
done their
a conversation.
Before. Yeah. They've done their research before.
Yeah. You asked also what's different between now and when we launched. Women are coming much more informed than they were 5 years ago.
Right.
So that definitely is a difference. But and then you have this ongoing sort of you're always assigned to the same doctor unless she's away or on vacation. But within 4 to 6 hours, you will get a response back to any question that you have from a doctor. Or if it's not medical, it'll be from our care team. And, but we really want an aim for women to feel supported, to get the information that they need from a credible source or credible sources. We have, multiple doctors that we work with who either go on social media or do webinars or hold support groups and so there are lots of touch points and ways for women to get access to information and ask their questions. Then, of course, directly with the doctor, they can ask whatever questions on an ongoing way. And then if or when prescribed, then we have 3 different pharmacies that we work with that will ship the prescriptions, whatever you order, directly to your home. So one of the big things that we really wanted to solve for was women's ability to take care of themselves when at this stage of life, they're generally taking care of lots of other people first, whether it's their kids, their spouse, their parents, their dog, everybody
they have time
comes
from themselves,
before.
Right? Yeah,
exactly.
So what are the first symptoms that you feel like women in your customer base, that they reach out to you? Is there a common pattern? Can you cluster some of these symptoms?
Yeah. Lack of sleep, mood changes, sudden onset of anxiety, weight gain is a really big one. So, and in particular in menopause, women tend to gain weight around their midsection, which frequently is, new. So all of a sudden your pants don't fit. And now you have that tire around your middle, which is pretty upsetting for a lot of women, as much as we don't want to, we all want to be body positive and that's fine. But also if all of a sudden you wake up and, you're now 25 pounds heavier.
In your body, for sure.
Yeah, you want to feel like yourself in your body. Sexual wellness changes. So vaginal dryness usually comes a little bit later. But for example, postpartum, there's a lot of vaginal dryness that can happen because of the low estrogen state. And so sometimes women don't really know what they're in, if they're, postpartum or if they're in perimenopause. And, so these types of things happen. I think our sort of customer population has also changed over the years because in the beginning we were really searching for women or sort of available. We kind of set out to serve the woman who really knew what she was looking for and had been searching and just couldn't find it because those were the ones who were more likely to actually take an action and convert. So we have women coming to Alloy at all different phases, honestly, of perimenopause and menopause. What has been really fun and interesting has been getting to know some of these customers over the years and also how they've changed. So we have a few, if Quincy, if you're listening, or Joy, for example, those are 2 of our first customers who I developed a really personal relationship with myself because at the beginning, of course, when you're starting a business, things go wrong, right? Or something gets
trial and error.
Yeah. Like something's imperfect. And so women in particular who have been suffering for years and finally sort of find a solution that they are hopeful about, if they don't get the experience that they're looking for, then, that can be upsetting or jarring. And so in the beginning, we had some women who reached out like, you didn't get me what I wanted, or you didn't, I'm so upset about this, or the doctor said that, or, whatever. And so or like my shipment was late or whatever it was. And so I was generally the one who was dispatched to like call these women and be like, I'm so sorry. We're just like you. We're really, we're trying, but like, tell me what your problem is. And I will do everything that I can to help you and advocate for you. So I really became, that was a great thing to do also because, I got to really hear and learn firsthand, like, what do we need to fix? What is making women upset? What can we do to support them? Because the whole mission here is to like give you what you need, right? As a woman going through this, I have developed some relationships with women and have heard all kinds of things about, their marriages, their sexual life, their weight challenges, all kinds of stuff. There was one woman who really, who I'll never forget, who had a hysterectomy at 37 and was never given any kind of support or hormonal support or emotional support since that point. And it was about, 10 or 15 years later, I think. And her vaginal symptoms and dryness was so severe that she could hardly walk. And we got her prescription for vaginal estrogen and her life turned around. It was that simple. Like these things can be so extreme. And if you feel, you can't say the word vagina, or you don't have a doctor who's supportive, or you go to the doctor and they say, have a glass of wine and use some moisturizer, you're not solving the problem. And so that really can compound on itself. I spoke to a woman a couple of years ago who developed such an onset of debilitating anxiety in perimenopause that she was no longer able to drive through tunnels. And she had to drive through a tunnel to get to her work. And so for a period of time, her husband drove her because sudden onset anxiety about weird things can happen, in perimenopause with the loss, with the sort of change in hormones, loss of hormones. A lot of women develop sudden onset anxiety that they didn't have before. Mood changes is a very, very common, rage, like getting enraged by the sound of people chewing, for example, is not something that's typical necessarily, but happens to a lot of women. Like if you scroll social media, you'll definitely see like the chewing thing, or like just, this person's driving me crazy. And so then this poor woman, developed a weird phobia about driving over bridges and through tunnels. And so then her husband drove her for a while and eventually he had to get on with his life also and couldn't be driving her every day to work. So she quit. She quit her job.
My God.
We sort of got to her, or she got to us more accurately a couple of years later, not working. And then she couldn't believe that she actually felt like a normal person again, back to her old self, but now had to recreate her life essentially because she was no longer working and had quit her job. And there's some statistics out of the UK about the number of women who quit their jobs because of perimenopausal and menopausal symptoms. And it's a percentage that's way too high. There's no reason, especially, you would never think about a man at the top of his career at age 50 quitting because, of some biological symptom that's easy to fix, but nobody wants to address. Yeah. It's a big problem for the workforce. It's a problem for all kinds of things when women just drop out because they can't leave the house because their erratic periods are too dramatic. I actually was recently speaking to somebody here who was really struggling with perimenopause and So unfortunately couldn't be an Alloy customer because she's not in the United States, but I was helping sort of coach her how to talk to the doctor and get what she needs and just listening to like what is actually going on. I have a feeling, from what you're describing, you probably are having very irregular periods, and are they sometimes extremely heavy? And she said, yeah, how did you know? There are 3 or 4 days per month that I literally can't leave my house because my periods are so heavy that, I'm like bleeding through my clothes. It's humiliating. I can't wear enough pads or tampons to actually keep it under control. So I'm housebound for 3 to 4 days every single month. Well, that's outrageous,
And that's so common. I hear it very often also with the women that I work and in my community. It's such a common symptom, and we just accept it for years and years because we are not provided with a solution other than during the reproductive years, the pill. That's the only solution that we are being provided with.
Yeah. Which, by the way, in perimenopause is a very effective tool. So there's a lot of bias around birth control pills, and people don't come to that conversation usually without a predetermined point of view. But in perimenopause in particular, so menopausal hormonal therapy is not a high enough dose nor the type of estrogen to be able to override the production of your own ovaries, which, if you're still menstruating, like what the pill does is it kind of takes over, it shuts down your natural production, and it takes over and delivers a form of estrogen and progestin that is similar but not identical to what your body makes. And that can not only will stop that erratic bleeding and, give you either no bleeding or regular bleeding, depending on how you take the pill and which type. But for women in perimenopause, you can get pregnant. There are a lot of women who you'll always hear about the oops baby or the whatever. And so one, if you don't want to get pregnant or you want to manage that erratic bleeding, the birth control pill is a really really helpful solution. It's not the only solution. And, depending of course on how you feel, some women don't like the way that they feel on the birth control pill. Some women feel okay on it.
And as you said in the very beginning, it's not just one solution. It's also a multitude of things that you can do.
Exactly.
Right? It's also changes in your lifestyle, in your diet, taking care of your exercise, your movement, your lymphatic system, all of it, sleeping pattern, all of it is all interconnected.
Exactly. But we're not given that information and that sort of wide variety of tools to put in our toolbox to, really sort of have them work together. And I think that's really helpful and important information for people to know. But in our case, for women to know that there are lots of different things that can be helpful and, really effective.
Yeah.
And that has really changed as women have gotten more informed, that more women, want to seek treatment maybe before it's a crisis. Like, we don't need to send women into a deep, dark hole before we're willing to give them help, or we shouldn't be. That is what we've become accustomed to, is watching women suffer and then finally being like, okay, fine. If you really need it, I'll give you some coconut oil for your vagina or something stupid, as opposed to like letting women
treatment that actually works.
Yeah, giving them something that works in time so that they don't need to. I've spoken to women whose marriages, not one, but many marriages have dissolved over vaginal issues that are totally preventable
fixable
and solvable.
Yeah.
Like if you are having really painful sex and either your partner doesn't understand and support that, or you're too afraid to say it, or you just don't want to have sex anymore, like that kind of can be the end of a relationship, and that has happened to many of our customers. So where do you feel like
more of that education should be inserted in our lives? Is it early on during our maybe 20s, 30s to already start understanding how our bodies work, so then we know what to expect when those years come? I know, sex education in schools is completely lacking everywhere in the world. I haven't met anyone who told me, oh my gosh, I received, like, my sex ed in school was fantastic. I know so much about my body.
Yeah.
Or is it coming from your own curiosity to start digging and understanding yourself and your body? I feel like there are so many gaps, but I wonder how do we start filling those gaps?
I guess, first of all, at the most basic level in human biology, as we're learning biology, we should learn that there's puberty and then there's also perimenopause and menopause. Like I don't even think that shows up in course curriculum in terms of just learning the basics. Like, here's the evolution of life. And you should know about this point also when like you're not only no longer able to reproduce, but, these are the things that this is what estrogen does, or this is what hormones do generally. Like there's very little information about hormones at all. I think we're in a strange time of the world where, who to trust in terms of information is, obviously like so difficult, and people kind of choose which camp they're in, and
the pendulum is so swinging far left, far right, always so polarized. I hear it so many. Like I'm in the space of menstrual health, right? Like that's my topic. That's what I talk about all day long. And even in this topic, we have so many contradictions all the time. You cannot satisfy everyone all the time. You somehow just have to choose your camp, right? Like speaking of like menstrual cycles, I remember I have so many women in my community who are saying that they wish they didn't have a cycle because their lives would be so much easier, right? Like they don't want to go through all these the roller coaster of the hormones that they go through on a monthly basis. They don't have to deal with the messiness of the periods and the discomfort that comes with it. Now that you've been on both sides and for you it happened overnight, what would you advise them? What would be your message to them?
Don't be afraid. I think, that's probably the biggest thing is, and speak out, find people who be informed, find people who you can talk to learn more information. But I think that the shame and the silence is actually the worst part of what keeps us feeling bad. If you understand what's happening and you can talk to people and find strategies to deal, with, I was lucky that actually menstruation was never really I didn't have terrible cramps, or it wasn't a debilitating thing for me. It was just kind of something. And I took the pill for years, and then I had an IUD. So it just wasn't kind of a big part of my life, funnily enough. But I think that just these types of conversations and being aware and informed up front that, first of all, everybody is different. We're all individual bodies that have different environments, different, levels of hormones, different, and that's okay. And so if you can just sort of taking the sting and the shame and the fear and anxiety out of the biology of it, I think, and sticking to facts and really understanding what is going on, at least for me, is helpful, and I think is something that more women and younger women should know.
How do you remove that shame? How do you practically take the topic of now menopause out of that box of being a taboo? How do you do it?
I mean, just literally talk about it. So, for example, you have asked me a couple of times, like, are you comfortable talking about this? And I have said, I'm kind of at this point comfortable about talking. I'll say anything, about what's happened to me, because it is so important for other women to understand that, so we really innovated in terms of making topical estrogen skincare a thing, and available and accessible to more women, because actually as you age, your skin loses estrogen. We have estrogen receptors all throughout our skin. And the reason why your skin starts to get dry, wrinkled, and crepey, and thinner, and less, have less collagen and elasticity is due to the loss of estrogen. Also, photoaging that's real, but really the difference between, you've always had photoaging. So like the difference between yesterday and today is the loss of estrogen when you go into menopause for your skin.
That's what you told me when I told you, oh my gosh, you look amazing. And you're turning 52, right? You're using estrogen. That was the word.
Yeah. But the reason that I discovered using estrogen on my skin was that I peed in my pants at the supermarket. And I had been having some vaginal symptoms, dryness, and kind of irritation that I had never had before. It didn't really immediately hit me that, like, why am I having these vaginal symptoms? And being, the CEO of a menopause company and in this conversation a lot, I, of course, and being kind of the health warrior that I am, I sort of started to peel away the onion and realized that I had been taking half my normal dose accidentally of estrogen. I had been sort of gotten the wrong dose pill, didn't notice, and after 4 months, literally lost control of my bladder because your bladder is super estrogen sensitive. And I had never had these vaginal symptoms before. I had been taking, 1 milligram of estrogen every day. And now all of a sudden I was taking half a milligram and my body went crazy. And I really understood what was happening when I truly peed. I had pee in my shoes at the supermarket when I was like, oh, I have to pee. And then the next thing I knew, I was like, I literally couldn't hold my bladder at all. So that's not something that you typically talk about, right? Like peeing in your pants. But luckily I was able to identify what it was. I was here in the Netherlands and I wasn't quickly able to get a prescription. I had to go to 3 or 4 different doctors to actually get a prescription for vaginal estrogen because the information is wrong in the US and around the world. So the US, the big study was done in the US and kind of created that black box, was like it destroyed everything everywhere. Yeah. And so I finally got a prescription for vaginal estrogen. It was estriol, which is the type of estrogen that is used in vaginal cream in Europe, that is, approved and generic by the EMA, which is the European sort of version of the FDA. And I used that as vaginal cream to cure my incontinence, which it did after a couple of weeks. And I was like, that was incredible. And that was skin. So what would happen if I put it on my face? And I started putting the vaginal estriol cream on my face, and it was equally remarkable. It was visible. I mean, people were really coming up to me and like, wow, you look really refreshed, or you don't look as tired as you were looking before. Like, whoa, what's happened? What did you do to your skin? It looks amazing. And so we, we're like, oh, we're really onto something here. This is a thing. And so we were luckily working with a compounding pharmacy that we were able to actually turn it into, like, the problem with the vaginal cream is it's really not made for your face. So we put it in a really nice base that is made for your face. And, and like, I never want to live without topical estrogen ever again.
When do you stop? Do you ever stop using it, or would you just continuously use it until the end of times?
Yeah, in the same way that you should also continually use vaginal estrogen. So, for example, we have several women on our team, just on our team alone and in our investing team, whose moms have died of UTIs, urinary tract infections. So,
wow, I've never heard a story like that.
Yeah, it's pretty common, and it's one of the most common ailments or things that they deal with in nursing homes, for example. So women are put on antibiotics for years, or given, have to have things in their vagina that like help them not pee and to prevent incontinence. I'm losing the word for what that is. Pessaries and all kinds of things that like all they need is vaginal estrogen. And if they had used vaginal estrogen also from the beginning, or let's say from the time that they were losing estrogen, then you don't need to lose all the skin. You don't need to have your labia literally absorb back into your vagina. Like, you can keep your skin and everything, the collagen, the elasticity, the thickness, the plumpness of not only your bladder, but your vaginal canal. Like, all of that is really important. And 100%. You can die if you women die not only from like getting bad infections and urinary tract infections, but from that urgency and need to get up in the middle of the night to pee. So, imagine the scene where it's an old woman who needs to get up 3 or 4 or 5 times in the middle of the night, falls and breaks her hip because she also has osteoporosis, which, estrogen is FDA approved to prevent. It is the only thing that will prevent osteoporosis.
And I also know that you are a big fan of strength training. I just remember because you mentioned osteoporosis, and we know that strength training is like the phenomenon when it comes to, preventing osteoporosis. Tell us a little bit about your training. Have you modified it now that you are in your postmenopausal years to how you used to? Well, you said that you didn't really work out before.
I modified it in terms of doing it. So in my premenopausal years, I did not strength train. I was definitely, one of those kids of the 80s that like the wayfier and the smaller you could be, the better, the skinnier, the better. You can see me. I'm not as skinny person. I'm 5'9".
I saw a picture of you. You were showing your shoulders, beautiful, bulky, nice, muscular shoulders.
Yeah.
So you can clearly say that.
I was a swimmer as a kid, I have really broad shoulders, and
beautiful.
I always
but I can see that you work out.
Big.
Yeah.
But I never wanted to have those strong shoulders. I didn't want, I felt uncomfortable being too strong because that wasn't attractive. And I think that mind shift of like, oh, actually strong not only is attractive. I mean, if you look at any other animal in the world, you look at a lion, exactly. You're not like, oh, that weak lion is the one that really looks good. I don't know why, only with women, it's like you want to look as weak as possible. So that was a huge mind shift that I had to kind of incorporate. But once I really learned how important muscle is for your body
longevity.
To work, for longevity, for just, like you can't, if you want to be able to get up out of a chair, off the floor or whatever when you're 80, you can't start when you're 80. You need to start now. Yes. And if you look at women, there's a account that I love, this woman called Joan, Train with Joan.
Yes, I know her. She's in her late 70s,
late
80s or so?
Yeah, she was really overweight.
I know
she had
her.
never exercised, and now she looks incredible, and she's strong,
so
and
strong.
She's healthy,
her attitude
and
is different, her posture, everything changed.
Yeah.
All from exercise.
Yep, exactly. So that's been really inspirational for me. And really avoiding osteoporosis. I once had to carry a friend, another neighbor who's also, this one was 20 years older than me, but we had kids who were at the same school. Hers was in high school and mine was in elementary school. But we were walking through Central Park one day and she literally, her ankle just cracked. I had to literally carry her out of the park. And it turned out that she had osteoporosis. And she was in that generation. So I'm 52, so she's going to be turning 72. And she was in that generation that was told, under no circumstances can you have estrogen. And now she's on bisphosphonates and all kinds of other drugs to manage the bone loss that she's had. And so it's really a trade-off. And I think back to your question of what should women know, that what you should know is that the sooner and the earlier you treat yourself properly, and that whether that's with hormone therapy or that's strength training as a 30-year-old and really, getting prepared, just making it a part of your life and your lifestyle, I think that is something that I wish I had known earlier. And
I know that you have a guide, right? Like the midlife Thrive guide that just got out. You released a new edition.
Yeah.
Is strength training part of it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. What else? So who is this guide for?
The guide is really for all women, and all women in our age group, really, particularly women in perimenopause and menopause to. We launched the Thrive Guide. We launched the periodic table of menopause, which is also really cool and interesting and has, just like the things that you need to know. But I think, having some sort of visuals and quick tips for women, it really is the alloy that you need. It's a combination of things. The sort of the key, without estrogen, without hormones, I think, you're sort of course, you can continue to live and be healthy, but you're sort of missing the key, but the key will only unlock the door to all the rest of the the thriving. It's not one thing. It's a bunch of things.
It's an alloy, right? Like it's a multitude of things.
Exactly.
And where can women find these guides? Are they for free? Can they get them from Alloy, or where is Alloy going now? What are the next steps? What is the next area that you maybe want to do developments in? Like the facial cream was a big innovation for Alloy.
Well, the interesting thing about Alloy also, back to it being a combination of elements, is we've spent a lot of time now here talking about menopausal hormone treatment, which is the thing that we started with, is the thing that we really believe is kind of the key that unlocks everything else. But it's not the only thing. So in sort of the verticals of our business, we have menopausal hormone treatment, and these are all treated by the same doctors and who are experts in all these things. But there's menopause, weight, which is a separate sort of vertical, skin, sexual health and wellness. So not only is vaginal estrogen something that, should be considered essential skincare for women, but there are other things also that, you might need help with, arousal or libido. And so, for example, we offer topical sildenafil, which is the generic name for Viagra, or the generic name for the what's in Viagra, that helps. It's a vasodilator. It helps bring blood flow into the area where it's applied. And so it can really help with arousal, stimulation, feeling in the clitoris and the vagina. Those are, again, you asked like, how have things changed? Those are words that we never spoke out loud before. We're really not allowed to say the word clitoris, even though it is, again, an organ that half of the entire population has.
I feel like I talked about all of these body parts so many times. I'm immune. It doesn't even move me. Like it's such a normal word now to have in a conversation.
Too. But 11 years ago it wasn't, and even 5 years ago it wasn't. And even to this day, we get kicked off, some of our ads get kicked off of Facebook and Meta and, other places because of using the word sex or vagina or, whatever. So we're really kind of slowly but surely sort of pushing the needle, I think, so that these things become more commonly discussed. It doesn't have to feel shameful. Women don't have to feel alone anymore. Yeah, I mean, why? Like it's so dumb. We have not all of the answers, but we have a lot of the answers, a lot of solutions, a lot of different, the probiotic also, so your gut health, like there are all kinds of ways that women can help themselves or be helped if they're informed and given access to information expertise and things that work.
Yeah, and information from a place that they can trust, even at the end of the day, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it doesn't have to. The whole idea of sort of shame and taboo, I think we can lose that.
Way in the past. Old news.
It's not helping anybody.
Monica, we have a few questions that we want to address to you. Like we do these like fire questions at the end of each podcast episode. Yeah. So I would love to ask you those questions. Only 4. Try to give me short answers. We know that we love elaborate answers. We had plenty of juicy moments throughout our conversation. The first question goes like this. Tell us a moment when sex ed didn't prepare you for real life.
Well, I think going into menopause for sure. I had no idea what to expect, how to deal with it, and even that it was a thing. I had to ask. I didn't know, and no one had told me.
Hopefully that's going to change.
I think the other thing about sex ed is that it really is biological as opposed to like, how do you feel pleasure? Are there, and I think that that's also something that women have, certainly my age, and maybe things have changed, although I don't really believe so, but having sexual pleasure was actually not ever something that was prioritized or that you were allowed to speak about. When I grew up, you were smart or slutty. You couldn't be both. And I think that also is something that we can and should change. Like, why are there a million options for men for erectile dysfunction, and we're like fighting to get women to understand that there are treatments that they can use to just get to a baseline level of like, I don't feel bad. Now I can actually start to experience some pleasure. So even the way that we think about Alloy, like our first mission was really like, stop the pain, solve the pain, and then once you solve the pain, the base level of kind of pain or crisis, women, the first women that we treated, we did a consumer insights or, our sort of first batch of customers. We learned from them that they had been searching for help from doctors for between 3 and 5 years. And so we took that from 3 to 5 years to 3 to 5 days.
Wow.
So, that's a really big sea change in terms of what women can expect. But the whole idea that women also deserve to have pleasure and enjoyment and connection out of sex is not something that I was ever taught.
Yes, I think it all starts with that education, the bit of education that is missing. Because if you're not aware of all these little things, you just take it or accept your condition or your situation as the normal, the standard.
Yeah.
Right. But if you're informed that something might be wrong, then you know where you're looking for better care. You're looking for, you seek care early on, and you won't accept the 5 to 10 years just searching and not finding your answers.
Exactly.
So sex education
should start early, should be regular, and shouldn't be judgmental. Like we're human beings who need and thrive on connection.
And let's not make it only about reproduction, because that's how, when we think about sex education, we think about how the ways in which you can avoid to get pregnant.
Exactly.
Like that's the immediate association we have with it.
Exactly.
Yeah, so much more behind it.
Yeah.
Second question. What was your personal aha moment that shaped the work that you're doing today?
Well, I think the aha moment was actually getting a prescription for estrogen. Was the first aha moment, like, oh, I just slept through the night for the first time in 6 months. That's really powerful. And then the second was how little access women have to this thing that's so important and transformational in terms of how they feel, how they will live from this point forward, also in their skin.
The next one. What myth about menopause do you want the most to be erased?
I would really love for people to stop thinking that transdermal estrogen, so the patch, is the only safe option. As I told you from the beginning, I didn't like the patch. That doesn't work for me. I take oral estrogen. Back to sort of the noise on social media and the fear factor that women deal with. There are people who say, the only safe method of using estrogen is through the skin, because otherwise it goes through your liver, but everything goes through the liver. And actually, a lot of women don't absorb the estrogen that well through their skin. And so really understanding yourself and being willing to advocate for yourself and not stopping until you feel that, whatever that is, like, I feel good now. So keep going until you get to that place, rather than accepting, like, no, that's enough, or you shouldn't get more. You're not deserving, right? Like, there are lots of options, even just generally speaking, but in particular within the estrogen world, there are a lot of different options that should all be made available to women, as opposed to being told, like, this, that, or the. Also, synthetic. The word synthetic is thrown around like, that's not safe. Don't take synthetic estrogen. Don't take a synthetic progestin. That's also not true. Like, everybody is different, and we have lots of different options. And so that's why it's also really important to have a connection with a doctor or somebody who you can trust and who has the ability to also allow you to switch around and try different things, or go up in dose or go down in dose, or, that's really the way that we developed Alloy was so much driven out of the things that I had struggled with myself, of like, well, now what do I do? How do I get more? How do I get something different? Or how do I, a pharmacist once handed me a package and said, you shouldn't take this estrogen, it's going to give you breast cancer. There are all kinds of sort of points along this chain that women are kind of told the wrong thing. And
demotivated not to try it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think we have tons of solutions, and at Alloy we have experts who can help you, help navigate those solutions.
Yeah, find the one that works for you.
And if the first one doesn't work, then try something else.
Yeah.
But like, keep going until you get your good.
Yeah. Is there anything in our conversation that I haven't asked you? Is there anything that I haven't asked that you wish I did?
I don't think so. I think we've had a pretty wide-ranging. Is there anything that you haven't heard from me?
Well, I told you, I think we could just sit here for another 2 hours, and I'm going to keep asking you questions. Maybe we can do a follow-up. Would love that. If not, grab a coffee somewhere in Amsterdam. Would still love to chat with you. This was wonderful.
Great.
I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for all the work that you do and for the impact that you have in so many women's lives. I'm looking forward to just see and watch your journey where you're taking Alloy in the next years.
Thanks. I appreciate it. I will say that it's very motivating to do this work because of the impact that we're having on real individuals' lives. And I think that what I'm most proud of is that not only extends to our customers, our doctors, patients, but the women that we serve. We've, the testimonials that we get and the feedback that we get from women like, you saved my marriage. You helped me keep my job. I finally can have sex again happily, like things like that really keep us motivated. But also the doctors that we work with have expressed us, they've never had sort of a collegial team to work together with. If you think about most doctors' office practices, the doctors are really kind of lone practitioners in a sense that they're not really working in a collegial group with the other people, even if they're working in their practice together. And usually in the case of menopause in an OB practice, for example, there will be one person or one nurse practitioner who's working, whereas we've really created this group that can ask each other questions, that they feel like they're part of a team. They if somebody goes away, they cover for the others. And so I think that's really cool and motivating to kind of also create a space where the doctors feel that they're making a huge impact and that they can continue. Most of them, as I said, have been practicing as OB-GYNs and delivering babies for years, but also working with women and have aged up with their patients, and so really feel mission-driven to do this work. And then the team is also super motivated because, of the impact that we're having on women's lives. And so it really is something that I'm proud of and wake up every day excited to do and really feel that impact on people's actual happy, their lives, their health, their happiness, their stability. And so, I love it.
Yeah. Thank you, Monica.
Thanks. Thank you so much for having me here. I really enjoyed the conversation and love the sort of the overlap and the crossover between menstruation and perimenopause and menopause, because it really is a lifelong journey that we're all on. And the more that we can have these types of conversations together, I think the better it is for all of us.
Thank you, Monica. It was amazing.
Thanks.
This was Mira Talks. Subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. If this episode spoke to you, don't keep it to yourself. Tap the likes, hearts, and stars, but most importantly, hit the share button. Send it to a friend, drop it in your group chat, or post it in your stories. Every share helps more women learn more about their bodies and live their lives free of the limits of shame. Check out our website, miracare.com, for tools, helpful articles, and free ebooks. And use the code ListenToMira for a special discount. Don't forget to follow us on social media for more.
See beyond the guesswork, track your hormones, and take control. Mira Ultra 4 is the most advanced at-home tracker, monitoring 4 key hormones in one test to reveal the full picture of your hormonal health, with 7 times more accuracy than other trackers. Irregular cycles, hormone imbalance, or struggling to conceive, Mira gives you answers to spark action. Feel sure, not stuck. Try Mira Ultra 4